Green Living at Home is brought to you by Nedbank. Make things happen.
Meet Brad Clark, an architect and interior designer who recently built and is in the process of refining his dream green home on a small holding outside of Johannesburg. It all started when, after a long search, Brad found a piece of land that suited his needs. He discovered a 3.4 hectare plot with ample trees, grasslands, 2 dams and a small stream running through the middle. Everything about the property was perfect, except for the condition it was in when he found it.
When we got here, there were quite a few vagrants living on the property at the time, probably between 20 and 60 people, and there was a mass of derelict buildings and 8 long drops and huge piles of litter and rubbish everywhere. But I think luckily we saw the potential in the property.
After a lengthy clean-up period, Brad could finally start building his new home, and as an architect, he had a clear vision of what he wanted his house to look like.
Being a designer, I didn't want to do a stock standard house, obviously, and I wanted to personalize it to our taste and to our family and the way we live and how we want to live. I did it completely the wrong way around to what you taught. I designed the house and then went looking for a site for it, where normally the formal instructed way of doing it is find the site and then design your house according to that.
The striking steel, glass and concrete design Brad implemented came about not just because it's the aesthetic he prefers, but rather because these materials are more eco-friendly in the long run when compared to a traditional brick and mortar house.
So once we finished living in here, pretty much the whole house can be taken apart and either reassembled somewhere else or can be recycled. The house is probably about 95% recyclable. Pretty much everything that we've put in it, although some of the products at face value seem very unfriendly to the environment, like all the steel. But in terms of recyclability, it's almost 100% recyclability.
The modular, prefabricated steel structure used for the bulk of the house served 2 purposes. It minimized waste during the build, and it helped keep costs manageable.
I designed the house so that it could be manufactured in a factory and just assembled on site, as opposed to building a house on site. So a lot of the steel work was manufactured in a factory and then just assembled on site. So pretty much if you could use a size 22 spanner, you could assemble the house. What that does is it minimizes your waste. So if you minimize your waste, you use less, and it's better for the environment, because a lot of that waste in traditional construction lands up in the landfill site. Cost of building has many aspects to it, and anybody in the building trade will tell you that you have cost of materials, you have cost of labor, you have time on site, all of those kinds of things. So in some of the areas, like the materials cost when you build like this is quite a bit higher, but your time on site and your labor requirements is a lot lower. So at the end of the day, it's more about the end product that you have, because the costs work out relatively the same as traditional building.
Brad's home is quite small by modern standards. The 2 steel modules, comprising the living area downstairs and the bedrooms upstairs, measure only 108 square meters each. The house was kept small not because there wasn't space to build bigger, but to keep within the overall design philosophy of the home.
When building an eco-friendly house, the best rule that you can adhere to is build as small as you can. Build only what you need. It doesn't matter how eco-friendly your materials are or where you're sourcing them or how you're building it. The biggest thing and the biggest contribution you can do is make that footprint as small as possible.
When designing the home, Brad employed basic passive design strategies to regulate the heating and cooling of the house.
Some of the basic design principles that I've employed on the house are general known architectural principles. So, you know, the orientation of the house is our living area is orientated north-south, because we're there during the day, and so it heats up and cools down, and we have great light in those spaces. And our living area is 90 degrees to that, so we get east-west light there. So we get nights, early morning light that wakes us up, and then the late hot sun kind of heats the rooms at night, so that when we go into them it's kind of a nice temperature. And then I've employed a very simple technique, working on the basic principle that hot air rises and cold air sinks. So over here I've raised the house off the floor or off the ground so that the cold air can sit below.
By using a number of modern green technologies, such as photovoltaic panels, rain collectors and boreholes, on-demand water heaters, and a biogas generator, Brad's house draws no power off the grid, uses no municipal water, and introduces no sewage into the system.
What we've done is we have a photovoltaic system where we've got 2 arrays of 15 panels that provide all the electricity that we use in the house for all our lights and appliances. I've got 30 photovoltaic panels, 2 controllers, an inverter, and 12 batteries. And then for the elements where we need heat, so for cooking we use gas, and there we've got 2 forms of gas. We've got LP gas, which is your standard bottled gas, and then we've got the gas from the biodigester, which is methane. For my hot water solution, I've steered clear of anything that's got a vessel or a geyser that stores water and keeps it hot for 24 hours a day when you might be showering for 15 minutes a day. So it's kind of a supply and demand system where you use gas. I prefer that kind of system because a lot of those systems that have a storage vessel in also have an electrical element as a backup. And very often that electrical element is quite small, so that when it does kick in, it uses an enormous amount of power to do it. And I just couldn't take that chance when I'm making my own power and storing it. That could drain the power from the whole house. This is really part of our rainwater collection system, where we've got the design of the house is quite a simple one. So I've limited where the gutters are, so it's very easy to capture the water off them. So over here you can see a gutter that runs along and captures water from probably about 30% of the house, comes down this one gutter, and then feeds along the rainwater pipe into just a normal JoJo tank. And then I've got a simple swimming pool basket that it just filters through just to keep the leaves and that out. And this is the water that we use for irrigating the garden and that. And you can see the kind of pressure that we get just from 2,500 litres of water that's in there. And that tank fills up very, very quickly. Probably 20 mils of rain and that tank's overflowing from empty. Over here we've got a biodigester. It's another basic principle. So we put all our sewage in here, all our sewage comes into here. And while it gets broken down by bacteria, it gives off methane. And then we can use that methane. And again, like most stuff on the farm, it's got a dual function. It takes care and breaks down our sewage, and then it also provides gas.
While these elements do have a cost premium when building, when put together, they drastically lessen the house's running costs and work in harmony to produce a truly off-the-grid home.
It's like everything when you go this route. The initial cost is always high, and your operational cost is virtually zero. So I mean, I justify the cost is I drove the same car for 8 years, and that justified the cost of me putting the system in. And if most people in this country just didn't renew their cars every 3 or 4 years, they could also afford to put the system in.
Using an ingenious combination of good design principles and green technologies, Brad has managed to build a stylish, eco-friendly house with a tiny carbon footprint that is completely self-sufficient without sacrificing his or his family's comfort.
We don't live our lives any differently to any other South African family. We watch TV at night, we put lights on in the house, we listen to music, you know, all the lights can be on in the house at one time. We've got electrical appliances for fridges and stuff like that, and we live a pretty normal life.
Next week, we'll take a look at what solutions Brad has employed outside his house to create a truly green garden.
Green Living at Home was brought to you by Nedbank. Make things happen. Green Living at Home is brought to you by Nedbank. Make things happen.
Last week, we took a look at the design and green elements of Brad Clark's astonishing eco-friendly home. Today, we're going to explore all the different green elements he's used in his garden to make it as environmentally responsible as possible. Firstly, Brad's converted a large part of his garden into an organic vegetable patch, where he grows more healthy veggies than he and his family can use.
We don't do too well on the rooted veggies, because I think the rooted veggies require quite a poor poorly fed soil, and I think our compost is too rich for that. But you really do well with the squashes and cucumbers and baby marrows and beans and peas and things like that. So we rotate the crops through. We try to not grow a monocrop, so the same crop all next to each other. So we do, a bed like this of baby marrows at the moment, and then once they're out, we might put cucumbers in or butternut or something like that and rotate it.
Even though Brad's veggie garden is substantial, he uses no municipal water for irrigation. In an average growing season, his garden produces around 80 kilograms of beans and around 110 kilograms of butternut per 12 by 6 meter tunnel, largely due to the high quality homemade compost he uses.
There's two big drivers when you want to farm veggies in an organic way. The first one is you need to produce your own compost and not use kind of industrially manufactured fertilizers. And the second thing is insecticides and how you produce them, and then obviously where you get your seed from. There's lots of theories about compost and how you make compost, and if you should turn it or if you shouldn't turn it, and how long you should leave it, and all of those kinds of things. So we do, our method of compost is actually putting them in these pens here, so they're quite well aerated. We layer it only by virtue is when we're collecting cow dung. We collect all the cow dung and put it in. The veggie scraps go on as and when they come out of the kitchen, so we're not really scientific about that. And then what we do differently is we're in no hurry for compost. So we leave our compost for a year to mature and break down. And we've got 4 pens like this that we do that in, and we just rotate through all the compost pens. We recycle all kitchen waste, cardboard even. If you have raw cardboard, it's great for composts. Veggie scraps, eggshells, the cow manure is great. That's the main component that we put here.
Brad's solution to the second issue he raised regarding growing organic vegetables, namely the use of insecticides, is as simple and as organic as you can get.
Our method of controlling insects and bugs and things like that, we employ the chickens, and the chickens are free roaming, so they roam everywhere on the farm and they can eat the bugs. They spend quite a lot of time on the compost heaps, sharing it with the Haudidars, eating insects and things like that, and then walking between the veggie patches and eating them.
Brad used a similar method to control the rat and mosquito problem he had when he first bought the property, one that brings balance and harmony to his garden.
We approached some guys called Eco Solutions who delivered us some owls that we took care of for 3 weeks and then released them. So to date we've released 9 owls altogether, including barn owls and spotted eagle owls. And they came in, and it took the owls, I'd say roughly about 18 months, and they created that equilibrium where we don't have a problem with rats at all anymore. The reason why we live out here is to get away from chemicals and poisons and things like that. So the last thing I want to be doing is spraying my kids from head to toe with insecticides to stop the mozzies eating them. So we employed a similar method, and it was a lot easier and a lot simpler. We just got hold of some bat boxes and put up the bat boxes, and it doesn't take long for bats to move in. So we've got 2 species of bat that kind of have taken up residence in our bat boxes. We've got the yellow house bat and the Saratoga bats. And a bat is a wonderful creature when it comes to eating mozzies. The literature that I've read said about 1,000 mozzies a night per bat. And we're estimating we've got about 80 bats on the property, so 80,000 mozzies a night that get eaten by the bats instead of them eating me is a good plan, I think.
Another issue Brad faced when he first moved onto the land was that the indigenous trees had largely been taken over by alien invader species. He's in the process of slowly reversing this issue.
A long-term project is to replace a lot of the trees, and we work on a policy, a 2-for-1 policy, where for every 1 invader tree we cut down, we force ourselves to plant 2 indigenous trees. So these trees will eventually go, and we've got our indigenous trees, the Celtis africana here right behind it in a cage because the cows like eating it. So we try and protect them from the cows a little bit. So once those trees grow up a little bit, then we'll cut down these and then use the wood in our log burners in the house over winter as a method for heating.
The idea of having everything on the property having multiple functions is a core concept in making the farm work. So, the trees provide shelter for birds and insects, as well as fuel for his fireplaces. The chickens provide eggs, work as insect removers, and replenish the nitrogen in the vegetable patch soil. Even Brad's organic lawnmowers have more than one use.
Yeah, so the cows perform a couple of functions. Firstly, they are pets, so we like having them around. And they give us quite a nice farm feel. They produce compost for us. And they keep the grass short, so we never have to mow the lawn. And then we can also introduce their manure into our biodigester, which produces natural gas that we can use for cooking inside the house. So the cows actually have a multitude of purposes. And we can also sell their offspring to help us fund living this lifestyle that we live.
Reusing and recycling is a key element of eco-living. Brad even went as far as using the rubble from the derelict buildings he found on the property to create a key feature of his garden.
We have quite a rustic landscaping design here, where we've got these 5 raised portions and we're linking them with bridges. So later on, these gump poles will have some kind of surface on them so we can walk between them. And the main idea is that it's a grazable garden, so the cows can come in here. It's another camp for them to eat. And then us as humans can play at this kind of level, and all the snakes and hedgehogs and frogs and mongoose and that kind of live on the lower level from us, and we try not to cross each other's paths too much, especially the snakes and the small kids. We try to keep them separate, and that's really the main driver between the mounds, and it also creates a little bit of interest. So you can also see they descend in size, so they go from a really big one that we can kick a ball on and play with the kids, all the way down, getting closer to the house as a small one. So it gives you a little bit of a false perspective. It's a little bit of a design thing where, because they decrease in size, it gives you a perception of more space if you're looking from the big one down to the small one. And if Mom's down there looking up at the kids playing on the top mound, Mom's a little bit more comfortable because you get a little bit of foreshortening with that, so she feels the kids are a little bit closer to her. So it's a little bit of a design trick.
Brad's dislike for chemicals and his desire to have everything serve multiple purposes even extends to his swimming pool.
We've got an eco pool that we've set up in our garden here. We're lucky enough to have enough space to do it. Eco pool employs an age-old system, which is a wetland. So we hear a lot in the news about the importance of wetlands, and a lot of people don't fully understand why wetlands are so important. So we use no chemicals in our pool. All the water in the pool gets cycled through a wetland, and the theory is a simple one, that the wetland plants and the microbes in the wetland take out all the nutrients of the water, so that by the time the water gets to your pool, it's sterile. So no algae or anything that we as humans don't like swimming in can live in your pool. And it's a simple process. It's just, once again, using the balance of nature, how nature looks after itself. We've just employed that little ecosystem here, and it becomes an ecosystem on its own. It has plants, it has dragonflies, it has frogs, and that's one of the beauties of it, that in your swimming pool now, like we've got frogs. In our swimming pool, we've got water lilies that we swim with, and we've got a couple of koi fish. So again, that old principle that we've spoken about before is the pool is many things. It's a drinking trough for the cows when they're grazing in this area. It's a fish pond, it's a swimming pond, and it's a little bit of a feature in the garden.
Next week, we'll head inside and see what green elements Brad has used for the interior of his home.
Green Living at Home is brought to you by Nedbank. Make things happen. Green Living at Home is brought to you by Nedbank. Make things happen.
So far, we've had a look at the design and green elements of Brad Clark's off-the-grid eco home, and we've explored the various parts of his organic garden. Today, we're heading inside to find out what additional green features Brad's adopted for his interior design.
The general use of finishes and materials in the house is what architects and designers like to call an honest use. So there's very little applied finish to it. So where we've got concrete floors, we've got concrete. The timber floors that we're sitting on at the moment are part of the structure. And as you can see at the end of the house, we've wrapped the floor going up the wall in like a timber tsunami. What that helps us do is make a small space look a lot bigger.
Brad's used a lot of glass for the living areas of the home. This allows the house to be integrated into its surroundings and offers beautiful views no matter which way you look. It also helps cool the house during summer.
So we also try and control temperature and things like that within the house using design rather than mechanical stuff like air cons. So we've got cross ventilation in the whole house. So at the moment, the whole house on the ground floor here has 4 opening panels just in this area here that are directly opposite each other. So for cooling and ventilation, they really work really well.
To keep costs down, Brad opted not to go with double glazing. Instead, he's gone for a rather novel way of insulating the living space during winter.
I've integrated the curtains in the house are an integral part of the building fabric. So the lining of the curtains is a neoprene. It has a neoprene lining. Neoprene is the same material that they make wetsuits out of, so it's an extremely good insulator. So we've got quite a heavy curtain, and on the back of that we have a neoprene lining, and when we draw those curtains, it creates a very good insulating seal.
The fireplaces in the home were carefully selected for their efficiency, and they're strategically placed to maximize their heating properties.
That style of fireplace is pure practicalness. So, I mean, like we've discussed before, we use the invader trees to heat the house. So it's an extremely efficient way of heating a house if you're using a fire. It's enclosed and it's a convection fireplace. So what it does is the plates on it are quite loose, so they stand away from the main firebox, and it draws heat around and creates a convection, which distributes the hot air very quickly in the house. So it heats up a space very quickly. And then also having it freestanding like that, if you have a built-in fireplace, you lose a lot of your heat into the 4 walls around it. Whereas this one, all the heat generated by the firebox and that goes up the chimney has an opportunity to heat your space. So it's a very efficient way of heating the space.
As he only has access to the electricity he generates himself with his photovoltaic panels, Brad's had to find ways to minimize the power requirements of the home. A simple way to do this is to switch to the right light bulbs.
Inside the house there's a couple of different variations of lamps or globes that I've gone for. Predominantly I've got a 220 volt low voltage type LED, which is a 5-watt fitting in warm light. It's not a sharp daylight kind of light, and they dominate my lighting philosophy within here. Within some of the fittings we have got some low energy saving bulbs, and they're really in the minority in the house. And then we've got a couple of fluorescent tubes to light things like the curve behind me, which we really only use when we want to create serious atmosphere in the house and things like that. When we were kids and we were growing up, the old traditional light bulb that you used to get, our parents used to buy in 60 watts or 30 watts or 120 watts. Now, I mean, down here, if I turn all the lights on, I'm probably at about 180 watts. So that's 3 light bulbs using the same amount of power that I've probably got 20 light bulbs down here using.
Brad's also had to adjust the way he buys household appliances. It's no longer so important how they look, but rather how much energy they draw.
We don't just buy by aesthetics, we buy by wattage. So I mean, most appliances, if you check on the appliance somewhere, there's going to be a little steel plate that'll tell you how much power gets used. And you just need to check on that. So things like fridges, it's not really just the power that they use, but how well they're insulated. So the little fridge that you see behind me has got a normal power consumption, but it's got incredibly good insulation.
Brad and his family recycle all their kitchen scraps into their compost heaps, but they take recycling a little further than that.
We are a little bit of bunny huggers, so we do recycle paper, we recycle plastic, we recycle glass, and we recycle any batteries that we use. I mean, batteries to me are one of the biggest sins that there are when they get thrown around in the veld, because they corrode and they rot out and they have all kinds of nasties in them that find their way into your soil and into your, the borehole water and things like that. So we're quite diligent in how we recycle those, and it takes a little bit of effort. We have to drive them up to one of the garages close to us where there's a recycle spot and dump our plastic and things there. And it's amazing how little other refuse you will produce if you recycle like that. And it's amazing how much recyclable stuff you do use as a consumer.
Another key element of a green interior design is to not constantly buy new, mass-produced items of furniture, but rather to reuse or repurpose old furniture wherever you can.
Yeah, it's something that we've done over here in the bathroom, where we've taken a second-hand table and chopped it in half and made 2 vanities out of it. So the lower section of this vanity over here is the table. Then I've just cast a concrete slab outside in the garden, put an inexpensive basin on the top and some garden taps with some copper pipes. And we have a very inexpensive and kind of something that has a bit of context in the house out of a second-hand piece of furniture.
Going green doesn't mean giving up all the little luxuries in life. You just have to be a bit smarter about how you get them.
We creatures of comfort. So we also like having things like hot towels and things when we bath. So it's just a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek way of creating a towel rail where you harnessing kind of free energy to do it. So as we run the hot water into our bath, it circulates through there like a radiator and heats and dries your towel as you have in your bath. So it's a little bit of a cheeky use of the energy.
There are dozens of ways to live a greener life at home. Ways to green your house, your garden, and your interior. Every small change you make helps the environment in the long run. Whether it's the smallest thing, like switching to energy-efficient light bulbs, or the biggest thing, like generating all your own electricity, they all have their place in helping us work towards a greener future.
I think the nice thing about if you're heading down that road is it's a fairly long road that you're going. And it's quite flustering to see all the elements that we've put together here and think that you've got to do that from day one. There's kind of steps and processes you can do to get you down that road in kind of a less than a one-hit wonder. And there are little things that you can do to get you to your final goal. The important thing is to start taking those steps.
Green Living at Home is brought to you by Nedbank. Make things happen.